So while we're talking about that, we might as well go ahead and just do a look back at 2023 year in review for Star Trek Fleet Command. I kind of went back and looked at some of like the high points and things that we got, and I broke it down a little differently. I'm not doing it month by month um, because from what we've gathered from the roadmap, they've said that they're going to do fewer, big features, big content things. So to me, that seems more like we're going to be getting quarterly things. Like they might still do individual monthly arcs and things like that, telling storylines, but they're not going to be doing like a new feature every month like they have been in the past because it's probably just too much work for them to do, and for them to properly keep up with and maintain and support. So they're scaling back, and we're going to get, in my opinion, what are going to be quarterly updates. So we'll have an arc every quarter, and give or take, and that arc will have like one big feature. Is how I anticipate that all happening. So I may have forgotten a few things on this list. Obviously, feel free in the comments, chat to point out anything. But let's start at the beginning. Quarter number one, at the beginning of the year. What did we get in quarter number one? Well, the first thing we got was we got fleet commanders added. And these were a nice addition to the game. We started with just Kirk and Spock, and then shortly thereafter we got Locutus and actually, we got Kirk, Spock, and Locutus, right? But you could have a pick of these two to get one of them for free, and Locutus was pay only. And then, down the road over the rest of the year, they slowly added additional officers who have additional bonuses. I think the fact that some of them, these bonuses don't have to be slotted, that they just passively work all the time, is a great addition to the game for lowering costs and giving people a better quality of life in certain things. Um, plus the active bonuses and the additional slots. Fleet Commanders felt like it was a pretty good addition to the game, and it's one of the things that rolled out and worked from day one, pretty much the way it was supposed to. I don't remember there being any issues with Fleet Commanders when they rolled out. People may not have been happy about the sourcing, that some of them were like pay only for a while, but we're starting to get more sourcing for these people. If you were completely free to play, you're either close to or you've probably unlocked both of them by now, Kirk and Spock. Whichever, you picked one and then you got the other one slowly, randomly, a few shards here at a time. 7 to 9 through the Incursion store. Locutus is also there, as well as in the Borg event now. We've just been seeing pop up. Janeway is still pay only, and Sloan just added is in the Section 31 store. But this was a good plus. And then as far as other additions that time around, that was we got the new additional Borg systems that were added. Oops. We got the Talios as our big ship, big ticket item there. Big quality of life improvement. We got these higher Borg probe systems to do grinding in and to complete events in. A little struggles in the beginning where, events that required you to kill Borg hostiles weren't counting these, if I remember correctly, but that got fixed and updated pretty quickly. And now we had the ability to start sourcing larger amounts of nanoprobes and score for events. This was all a great improvement. And then we got new officers. We got Hugh, who's a game-changing officer. Absolute game changer of an officer. With his ability below decks, adding that critical hit ability. Absolute game changer of an officer. And then we also got the Borg Queen, and then Gaza and Dezok were also part of that arc. And they're okay. Obviously, they only work in PvP for the most part. They have officer abilities too. I don't think we ever think to use them for that. But they do have officer abilities, boosting critical hit chances against Borg solo armadas and things. And overall, the first quarter was actually a pretty good quarter if you look at it as a whole. Events, for the most part, worked okay. Communication was pretty good. The Talios was a great ship and a great improvement and upgrade over the Vidar. The Talios is sourced for free. Doesn't require you to scrap the Vidar either, so you get to keep both. You just have to get to level 35, get the ship maxed out, and then you get a, I think it's a holodeck mission, and then you get a Talios. It's ops locked, so it's designed to keep you to move up. But overall, I felt pretty strongly that quarter one was pretty good. What did you guys think? Looking back on it, quarter one, pretty good quarter, right? Hey, what's up, Tunnet? Welcome on in. Barkman Belair, you guys agree? Quarter one, pretty good addition to the game. Okay. If you disagree with me, that's fine too. You're allowed to say so. All right, we'll move on then. So that was January, February. We got into March. March is where the kind of overlapped a little bit here with the because it was like March, April, May, that kind of range. Is March is when we got freebooters. Again, good rollout for the most part. Great improvement because we got freebooters and we got the ex Borg store faction as well as the ex Borg research tree. This added the sweeps, making the dailies go from taking an hour to 2 hours to do your swarms and do your faction dailies down to like less than 5 minutes. Drastic improvement there for sure. The X Borg is also where you would go to do your daily claim to source the Titan, which was our ship for quarter number 2, the Titan A. If you finished all of your X Borg research, they also put these additional things in here that you could use to do additional redeems in terms of gaining things for other factions, so you wouldn't have to do as many of the loops. I don't know many people who do this, probably because everybody is still working on a lot of their X Borg research. But if there aren't any of you guys who do any of these claims, I mean, obviously feel free to share. I mean, Isogen, getting extra raw Isogen can certainly help with your refineries, and so if you don't have time for doing stuff there. If you hate data mining, I mean, the option's there, right? That would give you enough to do your pulls. Axion loot here. I don't know if this is enough Venom to do a whole lot with, but can also convert this stuff into getting Stella particles and Eclipse codes, so you don't have to worry about grinding and scrapping Stellas if you want to avoid that loop. So the additional mechanics are here. You've also got Borg and Defiant. But I don't know a lot of people who have finished their X-Borg research who would want to spend the credits on that. I still have quite a bit left of it myself that I would like to fill in. Some of these material bonuses, some of this stuff not so much, but the ones on the bottom row here are pretty good. And then now, obviously, well, this is using a different material for the Borg cube out this far. This would actually be probably one that would be very helpful for me to get, because I do need active nanoprobes now to tier up some of those officers. Might have to save that for an event coming up, but yeah, I mean, even also improving your Bajoran faction rep can help make that grind go significantly faster. So a lot of big bonuses in here, and then but I don't know many people who are finished with this, that they're investing those X-Borg credits into those other options in the refinery over there. Now, the Titan A was our big ticket ship that we got that quarter. Not as impactful, certainly, as the Talios was. Obviously has a nice area of effect buff to it, hitting multiple ships. The buffs themselves, once you get some of the research and stuff done and you get out to some of these other ones out here, it can be a pretty significant improvement. The initial early ones aren't adding a whole lot because of just power creep and things like that. Like, oh, you boost your base damage by 5% or 10%. I mean, sure, every little bit helps, but because of the power creep in the game, even adding 50 to 100% in some cases, like, oh, if I'm hitting it for 250,000 with my ship and I get 100% extra boost because of this Titan buff that I've maxed out, does it even go that high? It goes up to 150. But even if you got up to here, you're giving yourself 80% to 100% boost, whatever. I go from 250,000 per shot to 260,000 per shot. Is that enough to do much? Maybe it shaves one round off a fight. Maybe it's enough to make a difference over time, depending on what you're killing. But for a lot of the earlier buffs, not as big of an upgrades. The later ones out here, where you're talking about boosting your critical hit damage, because then that trickles over into other areas as well, with hull breach and things like that. That's a nice one. Boosting your critical hit chance can also, especially if you're going after armadas and things where hue is not a factor. Um, a lot of your officers take a couple rounds to build up that critical hit bonus, so getting yourself a bigger head start can certainly be helpful. Boosting the number of shots per weapon can certainly be very helpful and beneficial for taking out, solo armadas and things like that. So I feel like that's where the Titan has really, for the most part, had its value. A lot of people with solo armadas, because you're buffing all of your ships, as well as even sometimes with group armadas, if you're trying to punch up a little bit, it could be the thing that makes the difference in terms of tipping it over. Throwing one Titan buff on 3 or 4 ships instead of having to do Cerritos buffs or Defiant buffs on individual ships. So, officer-wise was a bit of a letdown. This is where we got the Picard TV show officers. Um, Picard Beverly, awesome. Really enjoyed Picard Beverly at the time. Great officer, great addition to the game. Between her ability up here, making freebooters punching up on them tremendously uh, easier because of how she stacks with that cumulative, boosting your critical hit damage, where you can end up stacking quite a bit of additional damage round after round after round. Really could save a lot of time with them. And then the below deck ability, getting the additional broken parts to try and make sourcing ship parts easier as well. The other 3 officers were kind of a miss. They were coming on the heels of getting all of the strike team crews, and it was like, well, in case you didn't buy your strike team officers or get them unlocked, here's a chance for you to get some other strong PvP officers. That just didn't quite live up. They never really found a home because strike team was just so much better. Um, Maybe somewhere down the road, these guys will get better. If you have to have 2 or 3 of the same ship type, you're like, oh, I've got 2 battleships. Well, I can only put Battleship Strike Team on one of them. What am I going to put on the second ship? Maybe there's a situation where you use some of these guys instead. But for the most part, they were kind of a big miss. Definitely a bit of a miss here. Denver Stone points out in the chat that the Titan A's benefit because of what we just got recently with the Section 31 with the Armada speed up ability, which was just added here. Let's go to our facade. This was just added in December. That the Titan buff is now tremendously more valuable. If you have unlocked Armada Quick Start ability from your Section 31 store, you can cut the time down to like 30 seconds in an Armada. So if you pop a Titan buff, people have started multiple Armadas, and you pop a Titan buff, or even if you're doing it yourself, especially with, various things. Actually, let's pull up a graph for that. I'm pretty sure there's a chart for that. since we're talking about it, it's kind of a segue. We're kind of jumping out of chronological order, but he's right. It did get a tremendous bump up. And I do feel like there is a graphic for it. I just have to find where said graphic is. Section 31 charts. There we go. Armada speed up example. So if you have this thing right here, you can cut your solo armadas from 1.5 minutes down to 30 seconds. This says 10 seconds for the Eclipse and FKR armadas. My experience has been 30 seconds when I've done this, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is 10 seconds, and maybe my game was just lagging or glitchy or something. But even at 30 seconds, if your Titan buff is 5 minutes and you can start a couple of armadas and speed up the timers on them, you can get 4, 5, 6 armadas all done using one Titan buff, which is awesome because the Titan buff has like a 7 or 8 minute cooldown on it. So tremendous upside to it that they've built on, right? And it first came out, it was okay. We got some of the additional research a little later on, and it was kind of starting to get better. And now they continue to add other features to the game, which helps improve previous content and the value of previous content. And that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to build on things that make old things that were okay get a little bit better. It's kind of a way to bring up a balancing act. You don't make everything, oh my God, broken day one, like Carol Freeman. You put other stuff out along the way that like makes people just a little bit better. So like the Picard officers might have missed in the beginning, but if you add other little things that suddenly make their abilities a little better or give them some type of boost, you're getting more value out of it that way, and it doesn't completely turn everything upside down. It's a steady and natural growth progression, which is balanced and sustainable. So good point there, Denver Stone. Thanks for calling that out. By the way, Odo the Dragon, thank you for hopping in and renewing your Twitch Prime subscription. Before I forget, let's go ahead and update our push-up challenge for that. That's another resub. Oh, actually, it just says new subscriber. So we're going to count that as a new subscription. And that's going to be 5 additional push-up. Oh, screw. That's the wrong button. That's supposed to go to 5. So now we're up to 115 push-ups that we'll be doing January 2nd. Oh, that's not going to be fun, but it is what it is. For those of you new, check out the video on my channel about what I'm doing here in both December and January, where I'll be doing a whole lot of push-ups live on stream based on your engagement with my channels. So, coming off the heels of Q1, quarter 2, a little bit kind of a mixed bag, right? Freebooters, awesome, great quality of life improvement. Titan A, okay, steadily got better throughout the year. Picard officers, the epics, kind of a big miss. Beverly, good. So, I mean, overall, it's a decent quarter. It's not like, oh God, that was just a complete waste of time. Like, we got some good stuff out of that. Stuff we still use to today. So, Q2, pretty good. Pretty good. Barkman thinks Q2 was hot garbage. You think freebooters and the Xborg research and the Titan A was just hot garbage? It's an interesting approach. I don't know that I would agree with that. Actually, no. I actually just said I think it was overall not bad. Well, technically you're right. I guess it was March for freebooters being released. All right, let's move on. Q3. What do we got? What do we got for Q3? So this was, July-ish. Now, obviously, again, a little bit of overlap because of the way the calendar fell. Some of this stuff started in June, so it's end of Q2 into Q3. What did we get? We got artifacts, which were a nice addition to the game. We got formation armadas to source them, which was at least an interesting new mechanic and a new way to run armadas. The sourcing for the directives for them is kind of lackluster and leaves something to be desired there. We got the Q's trial building, which was a nice, new thing, a new fun thing to do, and a way to start sourcing materials and things like that for the new Forbidden Tech, which upon rollout was terrible. Forbidden Tech, the day it launched, was hot garbage, and that I would agree with. The concept behind it was great. The execution behind it was bad, simply because of the fact that the upgrades could fail and had an actual, serious failure rate in terms of doing upgrades. When you have a 60% chance of being successful, and you look at the materials involved in doing it, which could take you 2 to 3 months to accumulate, there was no incentive to try and level things up. It just didn't make sense. Thankfully, about 3 months later, they went back and made some revisions and fixed a lot of this stuff and changed the percentages and benefits on it. But upon its initial release, the bonuses of these Forbidden Techs were good. But the process you had to go through to upgrade them to reach these higher level bonuses was god awful. And thankfully, again, they did listen to the feedback. It took them a little while to come around and actually implement the adjustments. But you got to give them credit for at least recognizing this was a miss, this was a failure, and they needed to do better, and they went back and did it. So, having this nice little benefit for that. We also got, over the summer, we got the Voyager Arc release, and that was a tremendous upgrade. Now, the Voyager loop and the Voyager mining and things like that, a little bit bumpy at the start with the spawning of hostiles and things and taking a little while to get that going. But once you get going into it, it actually works out pretty well. Matter of fact, I have to go do that right now before I forget, because I forgot to do Voyager mining earlier. So there are some tremendous benefits, because I'm pretty sure this is what I'm missing here, right? Yeah, I didn't do my rare. Okay. But I think probably one of the biggest things to come out of the Voyager arc was actually, the ship itself is good. The warp range on it is tremendous. And as, the video I just did the other day, I think it kind of opens up an avenue for you to kind of skip some of the 42 uncommon ships and just use Voyager and the Talios and things to kind of get you through those. But I think, obviously the warp range, again, opening up avenues to all kinds of systems that you couldn't get to before, getting into G4 and G5 territory. Being able to reach places, relocate bases, complete missions for higher level stuff to unlock higher level researches. There's a whole video I did about, going into G5 Klingon space and doing a couple of missions in here because it pays out 5-star uncommon crystal, which you can then use to get like a prime. So those were all some big benefits. You had to do it with Aphesia previously, but with Voyager, it makes it a lot easier for people to get out there and actually do some of the stuff. Plus, the warp speed is a lot faster. The formation armadas were a nice little thing here. But certainly, I think the biggest benefit of the whole Voyager arc were the lower deck officers. Getting Harry Kim, B'Elanna Torres, Neelix, Tom Paris for below deck officers to give you hull breach, to give you morale, to give you burning without needing to take up bridge slots for these abilities. Unfortunately, Neelix does not work with Tal, but any other opportunity you would want burning, Neelix is available for you below deck. You know, Janeway, solid captain and bridge officer. Chakotay, a decent, second or third Armada crew guy. Tuvok, kind of the odd man out there, really only helping Formation Armadas or Voyager loot there. But I feel like those officers were a tremendous upside to the game. And at least the Species 8472s added an interesting mechanic with the ship summoning and that whole process. So definitely a mechanic and a loop and an arc that kind of fit, was very thematic, was very on brand with what Voyager was, way out away from everybody else, kind of doing its own thing. Why does Neelix not work with Tal? Because he was specifically designed not to work with Tal, because they felt like it would be too game breaking to have that ability triggered below deck. It would open up too many officer combinations if you could just run, because you could basically run like Pike, Moreau, Tal, and then put Neelix below deck to trigger the burning, and then you'd kill stuff way faster because of how Pike and Moreau would boost Tal's ability. Or Picard, Beverly, and Tal. So they had to make sure that you still needed to include one of them, somebody with burning and a bridge officer slot. Freebooter should have launched before Artifacts. They did. Freebooters launched in March. Artifacts launched in like May when we got Formation Armadas. Maybe I'm misreading something there. Hope freebooters get more options. Yeah, it would be nice to condense some of these other loops down, and it may be something that they do and add additional adjustments to that X-Borg store for sure, to try and make those guys a bit better. But Q3, as a whole, for those officers and things like that, those, for the most part, those mechanics were pretty good. Formation Armada's okay, Artifacts okay. For sourcing and things like that, not bad. Could be a little better, but not bad. And then when you start looking at, though, the Forbidden Tech, big letdown that has since been revised. The other thing that we did get introduced through the Voyager mechanic and the Voyager arc was isolytic damage, this secondary source of damage, which by itself in the initial beginnings wasn't that big of a deal. It was the secondary function, the isolytic cascade damage, that I think has been very detrimental to the game, and really power creeped it to a ridiculous level and turned things around. And that ties into the final thing that happened at the end of Q3, which was the end of August we got, or September, I forget exactly which month it was. I think it was August, that we got the Monavine, and we got the Carol Freeman and the additional lower deck officers added to the game. And that was a drastic change that we're still recovering and struggling with. Every older piece of content for PvP was thrown out the window with the addition of Carol Freeman. And that's never a good thing for long-term game design, because it makes you start to question, well, if they're just going to come out with something in a very relatively short period of time. I mean, we're talking less than maybe almost exactly a year after the first strike teams were introduced. Now you've come out with Carol Freeman, who invalidates all of them because she's so much ridiculously stronger than all of them that it suddenly starts to make you think about long-term investing in this game. And I feel like that was kind of where we really started to see a lot of the cracks start to form between Scopely and the community. The game started to get a little glitchier when they added isolytic damage. Just, not because of the isolytic damage, well, maybe because of the isolytic damage. We started to see certain issues where it was like, well, if you have these officers on your bridge, it's not counting for the events, or it's not doing this, and a lot of those issues have continued to snowball over the last 4 or 5 months. And maybe it was they put too much in the game too quickly, or whatever the case was. But Q3 is where I really feel like the cracks started to show themselves a lot more often. The Monavine, good addition, interesting loop, complicated loop. The field training for it is kind of ridiculous in terms of the fact that, in order to advance it, you have to actually actively hunt these ships, which wouldn't be a big deal except for the fact that actively hunting these ships um, takes down your base shield, which is just kind of a dumb mechanic. It's like, great, you can let me auto grind the automated sentries. Perfect. That's a great loop. I just park a ship there, come back in the morning, and I've got plenty of loot to do my refineries. Great mechanic, great quality of life thing. Don't have to worry about it. But the fact that if I want to actually move through the field training to get some of these additional officers and to get these additional benefits to do some upgrades, I have to actively hunt things with my base shield down for an extended period of time. This is the one that I feel like a lot of people have issues with. So they don't like being unshielded, especially if you're out there and you're hunting something and somebody comes and taps your base. Well, now you have to stop hunting to go back and, you know, move your base somewhere else or repair and, be prepared to play defense, because if you hit the next hostile, your shield's going to go down again and they're just going to come back and hit your base again. And I know that's kind of probably what they wanted because they like PvP, because PvP is good for profit. But it does get to be a little tedious. The refinery on the Monavine, excellent. Excellent thing, Being able to come here, do your queen's favors, and get very large amounts. Let's go find the chart for that one real quick. For the Monavine refinery. This is the one I think I want. Yeah, the queen's favor chart. This particular one right here, in terms of sourcing par steel, titanium, and dilithium, amazing upgrade. At building the ship at Ops 40 and getting that first chest, raw par steel, 3.6 billion. This is equal to what you would get between tokens and raw material from the level 50 swarm refinery. And this is tier 1 minimum ops level to build it. You are equal to the maximum of what the swarm payout would be on the swarm refinery for sourcing materials. And then as you start to move through these, whether you're leveling up ops or leveling up the ship, you can get to some very large payouts in terms of these resources, which can make just your overall gameplay a lot easier. Going through the 40s, ship upgrades cost billions of titanium, and being able to source large mass quantities of it on a regular basis really makes that a lot more possible. Well, it depends on your server, Denverstone. There's always people on servers who are actively hunting you, or stream sniping you, or those kinds of things from time to time. So it is certainly something that, for a lot of players, they can't leave their base unshielded for extended periods of time because they're going to get hit. And it is a common complaint that I did hear quite a bit about. But Q3 as a whole, this is kind of like a C plus, C minus kind of thing for me. Monavine good, Voyager good, Isolytic damage not really good. Q's trials pretty good. Forbidden Tech bad rollout. So kind of a bit more shaky here in terms of everything that got pushed out there. Officers with Voyagers, the below deck officers, very good. So a little bit more of a mixed bag here in this particular group. And I forgot to put Tuvok on, so let's do that. Oh, well, as long as I'm here, I can probably add La'an too. Yeah, why not? And then we get into our last quarter. Q4. The one we're in right now as we're wrapping up the year. And everything we've gotten here. The big rollout being G6, which, you know, very limited. Only a handful of players are actually participating in. The economy for it is insanely expensive. Very much a pay to even play feature, not even like a pay to win kind of feature. It's a pay to play feature for most people. Very expensive to move into and progress to. Hearing a lot of people mention that and talk about what even sometimes just spending to be able to repair ships and things on a daily basis because you don't source enough materials naturally is uh, holding players back from really like fully investing and engaging in that new content. Now, obviously, it is a brand new feature, so Scopely does expect new features to have a pay premium mechanic or dollar value attached to them. 6 months from now, 12 months from now, how that playing field may be leveled a little bit or how it balanced out a little bit more with adjustments they might make to said economy, more researches or things like that that get added or just adjusting certain values. But the fact that, like, hey, a 1 day speed up on your building costs 1.5 million latinum. It's a very steep conversion. And when, it's not like the building only takes 1 day to build, a lot of them take multiple days to build. So it's an incredibly, shall we say, exclusive club right now and will remain so for a little while here. We got a little bit more of the lower decks kind of carried over into that area. Um, we got the Enterprise movie officers that were just added. Picard and Data, great additions. Riker helps with wave defense, which was the other new feature that we also got added, which was wave defense that some of us like, some of us don't like. It's certainly if you're in your 30s or even low 40s, it's kind of a struggle in terms of how far you can get in these things, just because of the way the swarms increase in strength and speed. Sometimes it's not even just that they're just stronger than you; they just move faster. It's both. Obviously, they continue to grow in power, and there are points where they make big jumps in terms of overall power of each of these hostiles. But they also do move faster, so that can make it a little more challenging. Certainly designed for players not to be able to do it shorthanded. You can, if you have really high level players, they can obviously do it shorthanded. But for the most part, this little instance feature that they've created, designed to be run with 5 players, and it's an interesting feature, and it kind of lends to the way to source the fact that it's the only real way to source credits for the Section 31 store. It would be nice if maybe somewhere down the road we got something like, oh, I don't know, a daily, something you had to do as a daily that gave you some of these. So even if you are a low level player and you can't, do more than 2 or 3 rounds of a wave defense, you can still have a way to get additional credits. Maybe it's just like a do one wave, complete one level of wave defense, and they give you like 100 extra Section 31 credits, just to make it a little more feasible for players in their 30s and low 40s to actually be able to move. I mean, obviously, that's probably why they don't want to do it, because they don't want you moving through this as quickly without spending. They don't want you getting access to the Dolomite particles, which is helpful for a number of primes, getting Syndicate XP, that kind of stuff, on a more consistent basis. But, you do have to have high-level players if you want to make a deep run. We're talking 56 plus to really make it to wave 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's just on the lower level ones. I haven't even seen anybody doing the 50 plus ones yet. So I don't know how much stronger that stuff is. I haven't tried to do one yet because nobody's been really running them in my alliance that I've seen. People saying need more ciphers, need more ciphers. Yeah. The other thing that we got added this last quarter, was the Borg cube. And the jury's kind of out on that one. Well, no. Some people really like it. Some people like the look and the aesthetic of it, not so much the gameplay function of it. Some people don't like it at all because of the way that the tiers are restricted based on the tiering up of other faction ships and the requirements there. It's like, for most people, at best, it's going to be your second best ship. For a lot of people, it might even be your third best ship, depending on where, you get stuck in terms of tiering it. Because a number of these things, the requirements to get the component to unlock the tier might be past where a normal person might, take, for example, the 42 uncommons. A lot of people stop tiering those at tier 4 or tier 5 just because of the way the costs go up in terms of how many materials you have to spend to keep advancing. But to get the component to go for the Borg cube, you have to take it to tier 6. And that's not where most people recommend and wouldn't want to take that ship. So it's designed to push the envelope a little bit. It's designed to help people invest further into the ships that a lot of people either skip outright altogether or only tier up a first couple of tiers just to get some basic functionality out of before moving on. Or people who are skipping ships and just using the specialty ships, it kind of punishes them for doing that for a period of time. Eventually, when you get to the next higher level ship, you can catch up. The cutting beam takes a little while to find. Getting through the first couple tiers is a bit of a grind. You're jumping back and forth between systems. Then you find that middle ground, like tier 5 is a sweet spot because you can kill things and zap things all in the same system and make your life very easier. Very easy. A lot easier. Tongue-tied myself today. But then as you continue to upgrade it further, you get back into that point where now you're kind of warping back and forth between systems, or you're hitting things multiple times, 4 or 5 different hostiles that you have to kill in order to grind something to charge your beam up enough to then kill the additional thing. So there's a lot of mixed reactions, I feel like, on the cube. Some people are happy with the research that came along with the cube. It did get its own little addition to the Xborg faction store, or research tab here. You get little bits of additional bonuses to officer stats and shield and hull health. Nice. A little bit more with like PvP stuff as well. So little bits of extra research and things, then a couple of them that are just cube specific. Some of the stuff is just sort of a drop in the ocean, at least for the first handful of levels. When you've already got buildings and things and research that's adding hundreds, if not thousands, to your shield health, getting a little bit more, 50, 60%, not a big deal. The higher levels, if you keep pushing it and you're talking about 3.8, now you're up to 450, 500, 600, 700%. Like you will get to some big numbers, but also if the restrictions on these are tied to either ops or cube tier or things like that, by the time you get to these levels, you will probably have accumulated and acquired a number of other things that, like, getting an extra 400% to my shield health might seem like a big jump right now. But by the time I do what's necessary to get myself to the point where I could take this from level 8 to level 17, that extra 400%, I may have found other ways between researches and building levels and things like that that I've already accumulated 400 extra percent. So now we're talking about diminishing returns again. And there are a lot of things, officer stats, shield health, hull health, weapon damage, where we just see more and more of this diminishing returns. That kind of minimizes the importance of adding these additional benefits. So, yeah, G6 being a definite pay only feature, not a big fan of, but obviously it is what it is. It's a new economy, it's a new thing. Players are very unhappy with that. The Enterprise movie officers, Picard good, Data good, Riker, Troy okay. Obviously rounding out Shax and Ta'ana and Ransom and those guys kind of bleeding from Q3 into the beginning of Q4. Ta'ana not working very well for isolytic defense compared to the isolytic damage bonuses that like Freeman give, how it's not balanced there. Yeah, that's not great. That's not a great uh, balance for PvP. Its PvP is very much lopsided right now in favor of offense. It almost feels like, if he'll forgive me for making a football analogy, that the defense is in a goal line defense where they've got everybody up on the line of scrimmage, but the ball's at midfield. So the receivers just run downfield and they just lob the ball over everybody's head, and it's like, oh, easy touchdown. It's kind of what it feels like. Carol Freeman is just so far ahead in terms of the damage output that she's doing compared to the defense that they're playing, that the fight's over in 1 to 2 rounds. So none of the defense stuff really makes a whole lot of difference right now. Maybe that'll be something that they improve on in 2024, but for right now, it's very lopsided. Very, very lopsided. And then, wave defense, it's an interesting mechanic, and it opens up the door for doing more of this instance type stuff, which we're going to see them talking about PvP instances and things like that being added in 2024. So I certainly think we'll see more of this stuff. Haven't done any of these yet because power level wise, I'm not there, and I don't think many other players are. Obviously, this may be some G6 people or some 56, 58, 60 plus players maybe enjoying this, but there aren't a lot of people there at those levels, and I don't think people are going to accelerate their growth and spend so they can do bigger wave defenses. They would just buy the credits or whatever. So that also, we've seen a number of issues with this rollout here. A lot of people get disconnected as soon as a wave defense starts, right? Especially if you're playing on a mobile device. I hear that one from a lot of people. That as soon as the actual, like, they log in, everybody's set, everybody's in their position. As soon as it starts and it spawns all the hostiles, a lot of people get kicked out of the game. Hopefully, that's one of the first things they work on fixing, because for a lot of people, that kind of cheapens the whole mechanic. You're ready to actually engage in the content, and the game kicks you out, and it might take you 30 seconds, a minute, minute and a half, depending on your device, to load back in, depending on how server lag and what time of day it might be, those kinds of things, to get through the login server to get back into the game. Not an enjoyable experience. Now those hostiles have moved, blown right by you. Now you're chasing to play catch up, or somebody's running over from another spot to cover your area. And, God forbid, you've got 2 or 3 players who all disconnect and get kicked out. You've got one poor guy there by himself just trying to chase as much down as he can and kill as much as he can before those things get to the middle and all start doing damage to the thing. And now it's like, okay, well, we've just put ourselves in a big hole. Even when those players log back in and they get to do round two, you've already lost 20 or 30% of your base health. So now your margin for error has gone down significantly as well. And overall, the lack of communication, well, that's just steadily been getting worse and worse all year. So getting worse and worse all year. So that's kind of our look back at our year in review. Overall, I feel like it started off real strong. I feel like we were building off some very good notes from 2023, the way things kind of ended. Into early 2024, got some great quality of life improvements. Maybe that was Scopely pumping things up a little bit so their sale could go through, because that went through in April. And the new owners kind of took over in like June, July is when Savvy Games officially closed everything. And, the deal was agreed to principle at the beginning of April. And Savvy Games, everything was finalized and they kind of took over end of June-ish. And then since then, you know, the communication has been decreasing, the game stability has been decreasing, and they've certainly dug themselves a big hole as we head into 2024. So, always curious to hear your comments and feedback on what you thought about 2023 as a whole, or each individual little section. And yeah, I do believe that for 2024 we are going to get you know things on a more quarterly basis as opposed to each month trying to have a new feature.